I never thought my own daughter would try to steal everything from me. But when I discovered what she and her new husband had planned, I realized I had raised a monster. What happened next will shock you to your core. It started with a lie. A single, devastating lie that would tear my family apart forever. If you think you know where this story is going, trust me, you don't. The truth is far more sinister than anything you could imagine. My name is Katherine Walsh, and at 68 years old, I thought I knew my daughter Emma better than anyone in this world. I was wrong, dead wrong. And that mistake almost cost me everything I had worked for my entire life. But before I tell you how my own flesh and blood betrayed me in the most horrific way possible, please hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at family forever. This story gets darker with every minute, and you won't believe how it ends. The rain was hammering against my Portland kitchen windows that gray October morning when Emma walked into my life with a stranger who would nearly destroy everything. I was still in my faded blue robe, completely unaware that my world was about to shatter into a million pieces. "Mom," Emma said, her face glowing with an excitement that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. "I need to tell you something incredible." But what she told me next wasn't incredible. It was terrifying. Standing behind my 23-year-old daughter was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, predatory, with steel gray eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything in my modest kitchen. This wasn't just any man. This was someone who had been planning something sinister for months. "This is Marcus Blackwood," Emma announced, and the way she said his name made my blood run cold. "We got married yesterday in Las Vegas." The coffee cup slipped from my trembling hands, exploding across my ceramic floor in a shower of brown liquid and sharp white fragments. Married. My Emma, my baby girl, who just turned 23, married to this complete stranger, whose smile never reached his calculating eyes. But that wasn't the worst part. Oh no, what came next would make your skin crawl. "I know it seems sudden," Emma rushed on, but I could see something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, guilt. "But Marcus says we need to think about our future. About combining our finances with yours." That's when this Marcus character stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had done this before, many times before. He pulled out a thick legal document and placed it on my kitchen table like he was claiming territory. "Mrs. Katherine Walsh," he said, his voice smooth as honey, but with an undertone that made my skin crawl. "Emma tells me you're quite comfortable financially. We'd like to discuss setting up a family trust." The papers felt like ice in my hands, but what I read there made my blood freeze solid. This wasn't just about money, this was about complete control. But they had no idea what they were truly after. No idea about the secret I'd been hiding for 3 years. You see, my late husband David had left me more than just comfortable. Hidden away in carefully structured offshore accounts was $12 million. Money David had built through 40 years of brilliant investments. Money he'd protected from taxes and prying eyes. Money I'd sworn to guard with my life for Emma's future. But looking at Marcus's predatory smile, I knew exactly what he was. I'd seen his kind before. Financial vultures who married into wealthy families and stripped them clean. The question was my own daughter his willing accomplice, or had she become his first victim? "I'll need time to review this," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. Marcus's perfect mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, and what I saw underneath made my heart stop. Pure, cold rage. Of course, he recovered smoothly. "But Katherine, family trust documents are time-sensitive. We wouldn't want to miss any opportunities." The way he said opportunities told me everything I needed to know. This man wasn't just after my money, he was after my life's work, my legacy, everything David and I had built together. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at those papers and feeling more terrified than I'd ever been in my life. Because I realized something that chilled me to the bone. Emma had given him information. Personal, private information about our family's finances that only she could have known. That night, I made a decision that would either save my family or destroy it forever. I was going to set a trap. A trap so clever, so perfectly designed, that Marcus would walk right into it with a smile on his face. But what I discovered in the process would shake me to my very core and make me question everything I thought I knew about the daughter I loved more than life itself. The next morning, I called my attorney, James Morrison, a man David had trusted with our deepest secrets. "James," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I need your help. I think my daughter is trying to rob me blind." There was a long pause. Then, "Katherine, what exactly is going on?" I told him about Emma's sudden marriage, about Marcus's aggressive financial demands, about the feeling in my gut that something was terribly, horribly wrong. James listened with growing alarm. "You want me to create decoy financial documents?" he asked when I finished explaining my plan. "Exactly. I want to make it look like David left me comfortable, but not wealthy. Maybe $400,000 after taxes and debts. Create a paper trail that would satisfy a casual investigation but keep them away from the real money. And if they take the bait, then I'll know if my daughter is a victim or a criminal. What happened next will haunt me for the rest of my life." James worked with terrifying efficiency. Within 48 hours, I had a complete portfolio of fake documents showing modest assets, a small retirement account, some conservative bonds, and the house. On paper, I looked like an ordinary widow living on Social Security with a tiny nest egg. I left the fake documents where Emma would find them during her next visit, then waited to see what kind of daughter I had really raised. The answer came sooner than I expected, and it was more horrifying than anything I could have imagined. 3 days later, Emma called, but her voice was different, strained, almost robotic. "Mom, can we come over? Marcus has some concerns about the financial planning." They arrived that afternoon, and immediately I could sense the change in Emma. Gone was the glowing bride from 3 days ago. In her place sat a hollow-eyed girl who flinched every time Marcus spoke. "Katherine," Marcus began, settling into my living room like he owned it, "I've been thinking about our conversation. Family financial planning requires complete transparency. I need you to share detailed information about your holdings." There it was, the demand I'd been expecting. But what shocked me was Emma's reaction. She was staring at her hands, refusing to meet my eyes, her whole body tense with what looked like barely controlled terror. "What sort of information?" I asked carefully. "Bank statements, investment accounts, insurance policies. Nothing invasive, just enough to create a complete financial picture." I excused myself and returned with the fake documents, watching Marcus's face as he scanned them. The hunger in his eyes dimmed to disappointment, then shifted to something far more dangerous. "Calculation. 400,000, he murmured, then looked directly at Emma. "That's all." Emma's face crumpled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought it was more. I really thought." And that's when I understood. Emma hadn't been his accomplice, she'd been his source of information. But she'd been giving him false information, inflating our wealth because she genuinely believed we were richer than we appeared. But Marcus wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That night, my bank called with news that made my heart stop. "Mrs. Walsh, we've detected suspicious activity on your accounts. Someone has been making unauthorized inquiries about your financial holdings, using enough personal information to bypass our initial security measures." "What kind of inquiries?" "Asset verification calls, balance checks. Someone claiming to be from your attorney's office has been very persistent about accessing your account information." I knew immediately what had happened. Marcus had gotten Emma's passwords, her personal information, everything he needed to impersonate someone with legitimate access to my accounts. But when I called Emma to confront her, what she told me made me realize this situation was far more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. "Mom," she sobbed into the phone, "I need help. I think I'm in real trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Marcus. He's not who he said he was. I found things in his apartment. Documents about other women, other families. Mom, I think he's done this before." My blood turned to ice. "Emma, where are you right now?" "I'm hiding in a hotel. I'm scared to go home." "Stay there. Don't move. I'm calling the police." But Emma's next words stopped me cold. "Mom, you can't call the police. He has photos, compromising photos that he says he'll release if I try to leave him, and worse. He says he has evidence that I helped him access your accounts illegally. He says if I don't cooperate, he'll have me arrested for fraud." This monster hadn't just married my daughter for money. He'd systematically trapped her, isolated her, and was now using her as a weapon against me. That night, I made a decision that would either save my family or land us all in prison. I was going to take Marcus down, even if it destroyed me in the process. The next morning, I implemented a plan so dangerous, so carefully crafted, that one wrong move could have cost us everything. I called James and told him to create a honeypot, a fake account with $50,000 in it, designed to catch Marcus in the act of theft. If he tries to access this money, I told James, we'll have digital proof of his fraud. But I didn't tell Emma about the trap. She was already carrying too much guilt, too much fear. What I didn't know was that Marcus was about to escalate this game to a level I never could have prepared for. 3 days later, he struck. At 3 a.m, while Emma slept beside him, Marcus used her laptop to access the honeypot account and transfer every penny to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. But that wasn't the most shocking part. When the FBI traced the digital footprints, they discovered something that made my blood run cold. Marcus Blackwood wasn't even his real name. He was Martin Brookshire, a professional marriage fraudster who had been targeting wealthy widows for over a decade. And Emma wasn't his first victim. She was his 7th. 6 other women had fallen for his charm. 6 other families had been destroyed. And in every case, he'd used the same playbook: marry quickly, isolate his victim, then use them to access their family's wealth. But there was something else the FBI discovered. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew about my own daughter. When they searched Marcus's apartment, they found detailed files on dozens of wealthy families in the Pacific Northwest, including ours. Files that contained information only someone with intimate family knowledge could have provided. Information that could only have come from Emma herself. The FBI agent assigned to our case was a stern woman named Detective Rodriguez. When she sat me down to explain what they'd found, her words hit me like a physical blow. "Mrs. Walsh, we need to discuss your daughter's level of involvement in this scheme. Emma is a victim," I said firmly. "Maybe. But she also provided detailed financial information about your family to a known con artist. Information that appears in his files months before they ever met." The room started spinning. "That's impossible." "Is it? Mrs. Walsh, did your daughter know about your true financial situation?" I felt like I was drowning. She knew her father was successful, but not the details. Not about the offshore accounts. But she knew enough to make your family a target. And that's when the most horrifying possibility of all occurred to me. What if Emma hadn't been Marcus's victim? What if she'd been his partner from the very beginning? What if my own daughter had been planning to rob me all along? The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Emma had been dating Marcus for 3 months before their Vegas wedding. But financial records showed she'd been researching offshore banking and trust fund structures for 6 months before they'd even met. Her browser history, which the FBI recovered from her laptop, showed searches for how to access parents' hidden assets and inheritance law, elderly parents dating back almost a year. And most damning of all, phone records showed she'd been in contact with Martin Brookshire under his real name for 8 months before she ever introduced him to me as Marcus Blackwood. When Detective Rodriguez showed me the evidence, I felt something inside me die. "Mrs. Walsh," she said gently, "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but we believe your daughter was a willing participant in this fraud. She may have been the one who identified you as a target in the first place." I stared at those phone records, those internet searches, those damning financial inquiries, and felt my world collapse around me. My daughter, my precious Emma, whom I'd protected and cherished for 23 years, had been planning to destroy me all along. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened next will shake you to your very core and prove that sometimes The people we trust most are capable of betrayals so deep, so complete, that they change us forever. When Emma was arrested alongside Marcus, she finally told me the truth. And that truth was more horrifying than anything I could have imagined. She looked at me through the bars of her holding cell, tears streaming down her face, and said the words that will haunt me until the day I die. "Mom, I didn't want to hurt you. But Marcus said if I didn't help him, he'd hurt you himself. He said he'd make sure you had an accident. He said this was the only way to keep you safe." And that's when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. Emma hadn't been trying to rob me. She'd been trying to save my life. Everything she'd done, the marriage, the financial research, even providing information to Marcus, had been part of a desperate plan to give him enough money to disappear before he decided that killing me was easier than waiting for me to die naturally. But here's the twist that will leave you speechless. Emma's plan had been working. Marcus had been preparing to take the money and run. The only reason he'd escalated to actual theft was because he'd discovered something that changed everything. He'd learned about the $12 million, and he'd decided that amount of money was worth killing for. The night before his arrest, Marcus had been researching how to make a 60-year-old woman's death look like a natural accident. Emma had found his browsing history and realized that no amount of cooperation would save me. That's when she'd contacted the FBI herself. Every piece of evidence that had made her look guilty had actually been her building a case against the man who was planning to murder her mother. The phone calls under his real name. She'd been working with federal investigators to gather evidence. The financial research, she'd been trying to understand his methods so she could help build a case against him. The browser history about accessing parents' assets. She'd been researching his other victims to help the FBI identify the full scope of his crimes. My daughter hadn't been planning to rob me. She'd been planning to save me, and she'd nearly died trying. Because when Marcus realized what Emma was doing, he'd tried to kill her too. The hotel she'd been hiding in was actually a safe house provided by the FBI. The compromising photos he'd threatened to release were fake, and the evidence of fraud he'd claimed to have against her was a fabrication designed to keep her under his control. Marcus Martin Brookshire was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for fraud, attempted murder, and running a criminal enterprise that had defrauded 14 families of over $40 million. Emma received immunity in exchange for her testimony, which helped convict not just Marcus but an entire network of marriage fraudsters operating across the country. And me, I learned that the greatest inheritance I could give my daughter wasn't the $12 million David had left us. It was trust. Trust that even when everything looks hopeless, even when the evidence seems overwhelming, even when your own heart is telling you to give up, sometimes the people we love are fighting battles we can't see to protect us from dangers we can't imagine. Emma saved my life. But more than that, she taught me what real courage looks like. It looks like a 23-year-old girl willing to sacrifice her own reputation, her own safety, even her relationship with her mother, to stop a killer. Today, Emma works with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, helping them identify and stop marriage fraudsters before they can destroy other families. The $12 million that Marcus had tried so hard to steal now funds a foundation that provides legal assistance to victims of marriage fraud. And every morning, when I see that oak tree David planted in our backyard, I think about how close I came to losing everything that really mattered. Not the money, not the house, not the comfortable retirement David had worked so hard to provide. I came close to losing my daughter. The only inheritance that truly matters. And that, I realized, would have been a tragedy beyond measure. Because in the end, the people who love us enough to risk everything to protect us, those are the real treasures in this life. Everything else is just money.